Hey everybody, some Gadget Guy here with another Showdown Fight for Blood, pitting the Galaxy S6 against the Lumia 930/Icon. Now, we don't have a new Windows Phone flagship yet. We haven't gotten confirmation on any of the rumors yet as to what Microsoft is going to be providing us. So, for the time being, we're going to have to pit the newest flagship from Samsung against a slightly older Windows Phone from Nokia. But these two devices compare better than you think they might. In making the Galaxy S6 slimmer and more of a fashion phone, they've actually removed a few of the features that Samsung had as advantages over the Lumia 930. Both of these phones come with 32 gigabytes of built-in storage and no micro SD card slot expansion. And neither of these phones feature removable backplates or swappable batteries. And both of these non-removable, non-swappable batteries are a little on the lean side these days. The 2400 mAh cell in the Lumia and the 2500 mAh cell in the Samsung. Jumping quickly into design, Samsung has joined the ranks of other phone manufacturers in providing real metal trim along the sides of the phone. Though there have been a number of criticisms with Samsung's current implementation of rounded corners that we are looking at something that's very reminiscent of Apple's design language. Unlike phones like the Galaxy Alpha or the Galaxy Note 4, Samsung opted for a glass backplate on the Galaxy S6. It's a very nice looking material, but it does become a bit smudgy. It's a fingerprint magnet, definitely. And it's also really slick to hold if you've got sweaty paws like I do. Even though the overall phone is very slim, we do have a sizable camera bulge. It is one of the reasons why I am leaving this wood cover on my camera on the Galaxy S6, just to protect the glass around this camera sensor, as it does stick out quite a bit. Nokia was one of the first companies to start introducing combinations of metal and plastic on the Lumia 925, and they've pioneered this into a very angular and rectangular approach for the 930. And in general, I tend to be a bigger fan of a combination of metal and plastic, or metal in this matte finish polycarb, than I am metal and glass. Now, I personally think this is a nicer material to hold on to. I really like this matte polycarb satiny finish. And looking at the back of the phone, there is no camera bulge, but the whole backplate continues at the same girth that the camera sensor is probably mounted at. I've definitely commented on this in the past, but the Lumia 930 is something of a chunky butt compared to some of our newer, slimmer, sleeker smartphones. Now, what has been interesting in sitting down to put together this comparison between these two devices is just how well this over a year old phone has aged, especially with some of the more recent software updates that Microsoft has put out. We're running on a Qualcomm 801 series quad-core processor, which is getting a little long in the tooth, yet we're largely able to keep up with a number of features that are considered important now, things like UHD video recording, which we'll talk a little bit more once we get to the camera comparison. Samsung's Exynos, of course, is one of the big little octa-core series processors, but the combination of TouchWiz and Lollipop 5.0 seems to introduce little lags and stutters into the UI, into the system while you're using this device that I've just never really experienced on a Windows phone. Even silly things like pulling up recently used apps. It's a long press on a Windows phone, and I can get into it almost as quickly as I can the single tap on the little multitasking button on an Android. Live tiles allow you the ability to densely pack material onto a single home screen, but there is of course greater flexibility and customization options for Android in how you want to present that information. And of course there's always a comparison between Google Now and Cortana. Tell me a joke.
Why was the calendar nervous? Its days were numbered.
Oh, Cortana, you scam. I do actually appreciate little touches like that in providing us a bit more of a personality for our digital assistant software. Though recent updates to Google Now have greatly improved some of the functionality, especially in how they stack information on cards and interact with third-party apps. Now, both of these phones feature AMOLED displays, and I tend to prefer AMOLED over LCD. I'm a big fan of that insane contrast ratio. When pixels are black, they're actually turned off on your screen. And even though it's not always the most color-accurate display, I do like the juicy candy colors that you get, especially when you're in the middle of a game. I just like the way that colors pop off of these types of screens. Now, of course, one of the big differences between these two phones is the higher resolution screen found in the Galaxy S6. Now, guys, I've gotten a lot of flack for saying things like this in the past, but I just still don't see a tremendous advantage in having a quad HD screen on a display smaller than, say, a 7-inch diagonal. That is not to say I cannot see a difference. What I'm trying to say is that I just don't see where it radically improves the experience of using a phone, considering the amount of horsepower it takes to actually drive the display. Now, obviously, this is going to be a horribly inferior test for you guys watching this video, as I'm shooting this in 1080p and I'm trying to compare two different resolution screens at a distance of around 10 inches. But when I'm putting my face about a foot away from these displays, I can subtly detect a little extra sharpness in some of the fibers around this flower, some of the little crinkles and pollen balls here in the middle, and that is nice. That is technically a nicer image than what the Icon can provide. But it's not so much nicer that I feel like like I can't use the icon anymore. It's not like trying to go back to the 720p screen on something like the Galaxy Nexus. You gotta really get your nose into the phones to start taking advantage of some of those extra dots on the screen. And yes, I do have 20/20 vision. Again, performing the same anecdotal test here at a distance of about a foot from both of these screens. Some of these tiny little stalks I can see just slightly better, crisper edges around the sides there, but that's about the biggest major advantage. The overall composition for both of these shots is being very well executed on both phone screens. It's just those little quirks and tweaks. You would think that after an extra year of development and improvement to the processor, to the SoC, and to the software, that even just scanning through photos in a gallery would be a little snappier or a little cleaner. A year-old phone more than holds its own in competing against brand new Samsung SoC and Android software. Even just going back to my home screen feels a little snappier on the Windows Phone. Of course, one area where Samsung has stepped up is in improving the Galaxy S series camera experience, borrowing the hardware from the Note 4, and providing us with a 16 megapixel shooter with optical image stabilization. From a resolution standpoint, the Nokia is still well ahead with their 20 megapixel shooter, their pure view sensor, and their Zeiss optics. And even though it does have a 20 megapixel camera sensor, if you shoot in 16:9 in widescreen, it's only going to save a 16 megapixel image anyway. But in actual day-to-day use, that 4 megapixel advantage isn't necessarily a profound one. And you'll get excellent images from both of these cameras. We of course have full camera reviews on both of these puppies shooting UHD video, so you can see exactly what both of these systems are capable of. And while there has been a controversy recently with the S6 in that Samsung is interchangeably swapping the sensor from either the Sony or the Samsung-built ISOCELL sensor for the Galaxy S6, I'm actually not too worried about overall output, having shot on both the Sony sensor and on ISOCELL. Really, I think the major difference between both of those sensors are going to come down to really subtle differences in color processing. But for both of these phones, it's utilizing that half-inch sensor over phones like the LG G3 and the G Flex 2 and the iPhone 6 that give you much more photographic stills and cinematic video. You can achieve some stunningly gorgeous depth of field blur off both of these cameras. Also exciting, both manufacturers are really duking it out for improving their camera software. The most recent update to Lumia Denim provided us a number of really exciting features like rich capture mode, which is basically an HDR mode, and the ability to shoot UHD video. Also, the ability to refocus and compose while shooting video and giving us real-time options for controlling things like exposure and white balance. Also, just kind of a trip being able to manually focus while shooting video. For all you wannabe cinematographers out there trying to pull off those fancy Hollywood-style rack focus moves. Samsung, on the other hand, is giving us a tremendous pro mode, which gives us the ability to go through and control a number of the different settings that we've been able to augment in Windows Phone for a while. Quick access to control things like white balance, ISO, exposure. These are no longer hidden under a menu option, they're just now in their own separate mode. But one area where Samsung has stepped up is in giving us these presets and the ability to customize our own preset with things like saturation, contrast, color temperature, highlights, shadow information. And these are definitely features that I've been wanting to see on Nokia cameras as they give us a slightly more professional output, more professional control over our output. Still, both companies should be commended for improving the camera experience on both of their devices, stepping up to almost professional quality controls to help us improve the quality of our photos and videos. One other area that I gotta throw Samsung a little respect is in improving this bottom firing speaker here. Now obviously neither of these phones are really going to unseat a phone like the HTC One, but Nokia carries an incredible reputation for building in business grade audio into their devices. Samsung's speaker here on the S6 actually does a very good job of competing against the Lumia. The loudness of the output is very similar between these two devices, but I can actually detect just a little bit more bass coming off of this speaker here. Music, video playback, and gaming are going to be just a little bit fuller on the S6 than it will be on the Icon. While speaker playback is just a little bit nicer on the S6, I do genuinely prefer the system-wide settings, audio settings that you can find on a Lumia. You've got different graphic EQ presets that you can play with, or you can just customize your own if you want to play with moving different sound frequencies around. Plus you can skip over and then control things like Dolby audio leveling, which will help you balance out the volume changes when you're listening to music. Both phones allow you to simulate surround sound, but I also think things like the Dolby dialogue enhancer are kind of fun to play with when you're watching video. And while Samsung has stepped up to providing us better microphones on the Galaxy S6, there is still nothing which touches the quad microphone array found on the Lumia 930 and Lumia 1520. Not only does this provide for incredible noise reduction capabilities, with a simple tap of a button here, you can flip this into a surround sound recording device, capturing audio from all angles around you while you're shooting video. For those of you who care about things like selfies or you're wanting to do vlogging from the front cameras on your phones, the shooter on the Galaxy S6 is pretty remarkable. Not only does it provide for decent selfies, but it's capable of shooting quad HD video, whereas the Icon is still stuck in the world of 720p video, and that's kind of sad. Battery life between these two devices has actually been pretty commiserate. The 100-ish milliamp hour difference between these two batteries is negligible in real-world usage. And honestly, both of these devices are running on fumes by the time we make it past dinner. Though, for the way that Android handles background tasks, if I'm having a really busy day, I find I can drain the Galaxy S6 ever so slightly faster than I can the 930. And of course, it just goes without saying that Samsung is definitely a very tech-forward company. And the inclusion of things like fingerprint scanners, especially the much improved fingerprint scanner on the S6, and the rear heart rate monitor should not be disregarded. Samsung is an everything in the kitchen sink kind of company, and though we have lost things like micro SD card slot expansion, you'll just have more toys to play with on a Samsung than you will on a Lumia. Folks, I never produce these videos with the intent of telling you which phone to buy. It's just always interesting to kind of examine the pros and cons of each device, and then when we're looking at different ecosystems, the Android ecosystem versus Windows Phone, with some of the recent design changes Samsung has made, moving from the Galaxy S5 to the Galaxy S6, it is really interesting to see how this older Nokia phone is still able to compete. But of course, I want to hear from you folks. Do you think Samsung's on the right track here with the Galaxy S6? Do you think the sales success of the S6 is going to influence the design of the Galaxy Note? And as we get closer to the Windows 10 release, what do you hope to see in a Lumia flagship coming from Microsoft, now that they control the hardware team that built phones like the 930 and the 1520? Those are the conversations I love getting into, so definitely drop me some comments down below this video. As always, folks, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to hit subscribe for more videos and comparisons like these, and I would not be able to continue producing on this channel if you all weren't out there sharing my videos on social sites like Reddit and Facebook and Twitters and the Googles Plus. So please keep bringing more cool people to the party. Hit that thumbs up button, and I will catch you all on the next comparison.